The truth is, not every relationship will help you grow. Some will drain your energy, cloud your mind, and weaken your masculinity without you even realizing it. And the worst part? Many of these relationships start off as exciting, intense, passionate, and full of emotion. At first, everything seems perfect, like you've finally found the right woman. But before you know it, you're caught in a psychological game where you always end up losing. The problem isn't love. It's the type of woman you're getting involved with. Have you ever felt trapped in a relationship where every day felt like a battle? Have you noticed that no matter what you did, it was never enough? Or maybe you felt like little by little, you were losing the man you once were. If so, then you need to pay attention, because there are dangerous patterns that can turn your life into endless chaos. And what if I told you that there are 5 types of women who can lead you straight into that abyss? If you want to protect your mind, your energy, and your future, you need to learn to recognize them before it's too late. The drama queen. She enters your life like a hurricane, bringing intensity, excitement, and a level of chaos that at first glance might even seem thrilling. In the beginning, everything is electrifying. Passionate arguments, dramatic reconciliations, and the feeling that you're living something grand. But soon, that energy turns into exhaustion. Minor disagreements become full-blown tragedies, and every moment of peace is interrupted by yet another emotional meltdown. The man who gets involved with this type of woman finds himself constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing when the next storm will hit. And the worst part? The adrenaline of the drama becomes addictive, making it feel like, without it, the relationship has lost its spark. But the truth is, living like this is unsustainable. A man's masculinity thrives on clarity, purpose, and peace of mind, not on the emotional roller coaster of a woman who feeds on chaos. She doesn't want solutions, she wants reactions. She doesn't seek understanding, she seeks attention. The game never ends, and you will always be the villain of the story, no matter what you do. Psychology explains that people like this struggle to regulate their emotions and often don't even realize the damage they cause. The way out? Clear boundaries. If every conversation turns into a performance, step off the stage. If every mistake of yours is an unforgivable crime, ask yourself if it's worth living under this court of judgment. Drama may feel exciting, but a man's true strength lies in choosing tranquility. The nice manipulator. She seems perfect, always understanding, affectionate, and with a smile that melts any resistance. At first, you feel lucky to have found a woman who's different from the rest. But over time, you start to notice that every gesture comes with a hidden price. The demands aren't direct. They come disguised as compliments with ulterior motives. Sad looks when you don't do what she expects, and stories where she's always the victim and never at fault. She doesn't yell, she doesn't demand, but she makes you feel guilty when you don't meet her expectations. It's a subtle yet powerful form of manipulation. The man who doesn't recognize this in time ends up giving in, adapting, and before he knows it, he no longer knows where his own desires end and her control begins. The problem is that this type of relationship silently destroys a man's masculinity. He starts acting out of fear of upsetting her, trading his authenticity for an illusion of peace. Psychology calls this intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes you receive affection, sometimes coldness, and your brain enters a vicious cycle of trying to please just to get the warmth back. The only way out? Recognizing the patterns. If you constantly feel like you owe her something, even without a real reason, stop and reflect. Healthy relationships don't involve emotional games. A strong man doesn't negotiate his identity to gain someone's approval. True connection happens when you can be yourself without fear of emotional retaliation. The serial social climber, she has a sharp eye for opportunities, but not for love. Instead, she's focused on what you can offer. At first, she seems fascinated by your personality, your worldview, and even your little quirks. But pay attention. Her real interest isn't in who you are, but in what you have. She strategically gets close, praises your success, admires your achievements, and makes you feel special. But this interest only lasts as long as you serve as a stepping stone to something bigger. The man who gets involved with this type of woman eventually realizes that his value to her is directly tied to what he can provide, and when he no longer can, he will be replaced without hesitation. The issue isn't just material. She doesn't want to build something with you. She wants to consume what you've built. If you start facing financial struggles or lose status, you'll quickly see her enthusiasm fade. Psychology explains that people with this mindset view relationships as transactions, constantly evaluating whether better options exist. If you want a real relationship, observe the signs. Is she interested in your journey or just the destination? Does she share your ambitions or only benefit from them? A man who understands his own worth doesn't need to buy someone's affection. Genuine connections are built on reciprocity, not convenience. The eternal victim. Nothing is ever her fault. If something went wrong, someone sabotaged her. If a relationship ended, her ex was a monster. If her career isn't progressing, it's because the world is unfair. She lives in an endless cycle of self-pity, where there's always an external reason for her unhappiness. At first you might feel empathy, believing she's really had bad luck. But over time you realize that no matter how much you try to help, the pattern never changes. Any suggestion that involves personal responsibility is rejected with excuses and more complaints. And the worst part? You get sucked into her psychological game, constantly trying to prove that you're different from the others who hurt her. This type of woman drains a man's masculinity without him even noticing. In trying to rescue her, he becomes the emotional support for someone who doesn't want to be saved, just comforted in her eternal victimhood. Psychology teaches that people like this use self-victimization as a defense mechanism, avoiding accountability because facing their mistakes would mean confronting uncomfortable truths. If you find yourself constantly trying to fix her problems but never seeing progress, stop. A strong man doesn't get trapped in destructive cycles. What can you do? Test the waters. Instead of offering solutions, observe how she reacts when responsibility falls on her. If everything turns into an excuse, it's a clear sign that you're not in a relationship. You're in a therapy session where only one side is trying to improve. The excessively controlling perfectionist, at first, she just seems attentive. She cares about you, offers suggestions to improve your life, and makes small adjustments to your routine to help. But over time, every choice you make is monitored, every decision analyzed, and before you know it, you can't do anything without feeling judged. She doesn't impose rules directly. She disguises them as concern. You're going out with those friends again? Why haven't you finished that project yet? If it were me, I'd do it differently. It seems harmless at first, but soon you realize you're living under constant scrutiny. A man who submits to this loses his spontaneity, his autonomy, and eventually, his identity. The problem? You'll never be good enough for her. Psychology shows that overly controlling people seek perfection not just for themselves, but for those around them. And when this becomes an imposition, it suffocates individuality. A healthy relationship allows room for mistakes, growth, and freedom. If you feel like you have to justify every choice or ask permission to be yourself, something is wrong. A man's masculinity doesn't thrive under constant surveillance. It flourishes in the freedom to be who he truly is. Now that you know these 5 profiles, the question remains, how many times have you ignored the signs? How many times have you stayed in a relationship that drained your energy, thinking you could change the situation? The truth is, if you don't set clear boundaries, there will always be someone willing to test how far they can go. Psychology explains that the repetition of destructive patterns happens when a man lacks clarity about what he tolerates and what he refuses to accept in his life. And here's the key point: the responsibility is yours. You have to decide whether you will continue accepting relationships that drain your masculinity or choose a path that strengthens who you truly are. So tell me, which of these 5 women have you encountered in your life? And more importantly, what are you going to do now to avoid falling into these traps again? If you want to keep learning about masculinity, psychology, and the paths to becoming a stronger, more self-aware man, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you'll find the knowledge that no one tells you about, but that can completely change the way you see relationships and life.